slide deck just to have something on the screen. Thank you for recording, Brian.
Yeah, and while John's pulling that up, I'll just I'm Brian Shriver. I'm a board member of All Aboard Ohio, and I organize our Northeast chapter activities. So I live in Solon in Cuyahoga County near Cleveland. I'm very glad to have all of you joining this morning. We've got a wonderful turnout today. That's great to see.
All right, I've got about almost five after, and I think we've got kind of critical mass with our folks here. Brian, if I can task you with watching the waiting room and letting anybody else in that would come in. We'll go ahead and get started because I have a feeling this is going to be a kind of an action-packed meeting. We've got some great presenters today, and I think we're going to be, opening the floor for some questions at the end. And I have a feeling we're going to get a lot, particularly from those folks in Central Ohio who are very interested in what's about to happen. So welcome to everybody on the call. This is the All Aboard Ohio November statewide Zoom meeting. We're very delighted to have you here today. As you know, All Aboard Ohio is one of the premier transit and transportation advocacy groups throughout the state of Ohio. We have traditionally focused on passenger rail expansion, which continues to be one of our primary goals. But over the last year, we've really kind of diversified our advocacy to look at what we kind of call the first and last mile of transit. So making sure that people have opportunities to get from their homes to wherever that train station may be without having to use a car if they choose not to. So as we continue that advocacy outside of the passenger rail space, one of the things that has come up pretty frequently particularly in our larger metropolitan areas, is bus rapid transit or BRT. So today we've got some great guests from the Greater Cleveland RTA and from COTA who are going to talk about the current and future plans for BRT in these two areas. The folks in Cleveland already have active BRT systems. They also are kind of unique that they not only have BRT, but they have light rail availability as well. So I have a feeling they'll probably kind of give some contrast between the two of those. And then our friends from COTA are very excited. We've got some great news that just happened this week, and we are going to be seeing some expansion not only in our fixed route bus transit system here in Central Ohio, but also with new BRT routes. So, without further ado, we are going to be talking again today about BRT, or as I like to call it, light rail on rubber wheels. A lot of the benefits that you see with light rail, you'll also see with BRT. Those benefits are things like level boarding, so being able to step right onto the bus, dedicated lanes that improve not only traffic flow, but also overall speed, and also in that conversation, priority signaling. So at stoplights, the BRT will typically get the first crack at the intersection if they have to stop. Off-board fare collection is also a huge piece of the equation. So off-board fare collection, you do your payment outside of the bus. So when it's time to get on, you just get on and find your seat. It really cuts down on the loading and unloading of the BRT system. Today is going to operate as a BRT forum. We are going to allow our guests to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their transit agency and maybe some of the things that are coming soon or already in the works. They're going to take about 5 to 7 minutes apiece to talk about where they fit into the BRT or rapid transit discussion. And then I've got some questions that I'm going to put out to the panelists to digest and discuss. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for maybe 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A from the crowd. So if there's a question that you have pop up in your head, feel free to drop that in the chat. We are going to save all of those questions for the end of the forum panel. So, take a note, put it in the chat, and then Brian and I will work to make sure that we get as many of those answered in the time as we have. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our three panelists today. The first is Mary Beth Feek from Greater Cleveland RTA. She is the Director of Programming and Planning. We are also joined by Joseph Schaefer, also from Greater Cleveland RTA. He is the Director of Engineering and Project Development, has been pretty instrumental in BRT development throughout that transit network. So one of the leading experts on such things. And then Kim Sharp, the Senior Director of Development from COTA. She's going to talk about our plans going forward here in Central Ohio. And I'm going to throw a little plug in here. We had some pretty good news happen on Tuesday. COTA's Issue 47, which was a ballot initiative here in Central Ohio, everywhere within the COTA service area. So not just Columbus and Franklin County, but everywhere that COTA touches, passed, and it passed by pretty good margins. So that will give COTA and their partners really the financial ability to expand and really grow with the city in a meaningful way. So congratulations, COTA, for those of you that live in the Central Ohio service area and voted yes on that. Of course, we thank you. It was one of the things that we had really focused on this fall in making sure that our members were aware of what was going on and all of the great things that would come out of it. So
John,
excited to see that.
Can we have
happen.
a round of applause for that?
I'd be happy to if folks want to do a round of applause. I think that would be great. It's a pretty big deal. It's going to be a generational, transformational investment in infrastructure and transportation here in Ohio. So thank you to everybody who is involved in that from top to bottom. And then finally, I'll be acting as moderator. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning because I knew this slide was coming. My name is John Esterly. I am All Aboard Ohio's Executive Director. I am based here in Central Ohio, so I am personally excited about the COTA expansion, or Link Us as we call it, because I really look forward to being able to make better use of public transit. I do use public transit here once I get to the office. I'm able to use it throughout the downtown core with quite a bit of ease. But unfortunately, I live in one of the transit deserts in Central Ohio. So for me to get from home to the office just really doesn't make any sense. But I will be taking advantage of the fourth Link Us route once it comes online. So very excited to see that happening. So without further ado, I'm going to open up this BRT forum. I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to let our friends at Greater Cleveland RTA grab control first. So Joe or Mary Beth, feel free to share your screen. I believe you may have had some slides that you can discuss. We'll give you some time. And then Kim, you're on deck to talk next.
Okay, I'm going to defer to Mary Beth here.
Don't do that because you've got the slides.
Oh, but you recall I don't have the slides.
Oh, so we won't have the slides. That's okay.
Sorry about that.
We can just talk about our system. I don't know, Joe, do you want to start? Why don't I start with the strategic plan and then you can talk about our projects? So
Okay.
a few years ago, we RTA did a strategic plan where we identified priority corridors, and those are corridors that we have 24/7 bus or some sort of transit service in our network. They have really great land use. They have a great job density. They have a lot of employment and population, and they really fit. We called it propensity for transit-oriented development. They are transit-oriented communities, and we felt that all of those deserved additional study in order to make them do a capital improvement project, a BRT, whatever, on those systems, on those corridors. So, when we did that, the Health Line was number one. And, we have that world award-winning BRT along the Health Line on Euclid. We have another BRT on Clifton, which is a little bit lower scale. It's got very nice stations, peak hour direction service, and we added service on that. And right now, Joe and I are in the engineering and development phase. It's in the FTA CIG process for the Metro Health Line, which is West 25th Street. That will basically go from, we have a big bridge, the Detroit Superior Bridge that goes over the river. And it'll link that up down 25th Street, about 4.5 miles to the zoo. And that's one of our highest ridership trunk lines right now. And then we also we just awarded a study for Broadway Avenue, which links our rapid station at 34th Street to a bus loop over on 93rd on Broadway. Broadway is the home of Slavic Village and a lot of those really historic traditional neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland. So and we also have another TOD pilot grant that we just got on Lorraine Avenue, which again, if you start from the Detroit Superior Bridge or the Lorraine Bridge, we go all the way to the county line, which will butt up against Lorraine County. And it goes all the way to the end of North Olmsted. And that's our first very long, it's about a 7-mile corridor that we're looking at. And we're really looking at connections there into Lorraine County, up on Lorraine. So that's sort of setting the context. The health line, I can send you the slides, but it's one of the, world renowned, everyone probably here has ridden the health line. $9.5 billion worth of reinvestment along the line, land use, density, population, and ridership really was enhanced with that. We have all of the elements of a very heavy designed BRT on that. We have mid-block run. We run in the center median. We have our own median. We also have signal preemption along the corridor. We do navigate to the curbside once we get past University Circle. So that's been very successful. The Clifton line, again, not as heavy as a treatment, but peak hour directional lanes, very nice stations, a branded bus, all are part of that. As we go into design for Metro Health, we find we have a corridor that is 24/7, both directions. It's not a one direction like Clifton was. So we're looking at improvements in travel and mobility improvements on both sides. We're looking at about 44 stations along that 4-mile corridor. We're looking at signal work, and I'll let Joe get into the actual engineering of what we're going to be doing, some bump outs, and just making our system on 25th Street much more reliable. Our studies that I've done have showed that we have great service. It's a very nice trunk line. We also have other, especially in the Ohio City, of 3 or 4 other buses coming in, like 10 to 12 buses an hour. But the reliability is it could be 15 minutes like it should be, or it could be 45 minutes because we get caught up in that traffic. So a lot of the engineering efforts that Joe is focused on 25th Street has to do with that. What we're finding is a lot of our rails, like the health line, intersect with our rail line. So our BRTs intersect with our rail lines, and we're finding a real nice nexus of ridership going back and forth and transferring between lines. We chose BRT because it's cheaper. Joe can tell you what it is per mile for rail. Remember, we have heavy and light rail. Right now, the car behind me is our Siemens car. That's what we're going to be purchasing. We're in the process of purchasing one fleet for our entire light and heavy rail lines. And we hope to have them up and running in a couple of years. So it's flexible. And if you have a nice enough heavy treatment where you really look at land use, you really work with your developers and your neighborhoods, you can get a lot of investment in those nodes, in those stations, and along those corridors. 25th Street, if you've ever been to the West Side Market and been that Ohio City area, it's just developing. The high density is just moving down 25th Street as well as onto Lorraine and Detroit. So that's really the transit system. The robust nature of it is really assisting development and becoming a very high density urban feel that for us transit agencies is so much easier for us to service. We are a mass transit organization. So the more people going to the fewer spots, the more efficient our service is. And Joe, I'll let you talk about, if I haven't talked about anything, go on and talk about it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mary Beth. I'm the director of engineering for RTA, but I've also been responsible for taking these BRTs from design through construction and into service. I know that the focus of Euclid was certainly on rail-like experience, and I think we definitely achieved that with higher speeds, more reliability, more service, the articulated buses, the level boarding, all those things that BRTs are characterized by, we did. And it was proved to be very popular with the community. Maybe there were a few drivers that didn't like the new traffic patterns, but there are parallel streets that they could drive on. So Clifton was a little different, that we went through Lakewood, which is a suburban community, and through Cleveland. We didn't do the face-to-face, building face-to-building face reconstruction we did on Euclid, where we redid all the utilities as well. But we did have traffic signal coordination and not as heavy a preemption on that. One of the things that has emerged as a trademark of BRTs is stations that are a family of architecture that you can tell you're on the BRT corridor by looking at the station. And they tend to have a lot of amenities like signs that tell you when the bus is coming, emergency phones, off-board fare collection, and of course, they're architecturally similar or complementary to the neighborhoods they're in. So on Euclid, we have some very signature stations, on Clifton as well. Metro Health BRT, again, there'll be another type of station which is emerging now that will characterize the route. So one of the things that led us to BRT was the cost. Many of you might know that Euclid Avenue was studied for decades for rail. And the bottom line was the bottom line, that there just was not money for light rail. So BRT was emerging at the time in Curitiba, Brazil, which our board and several members of the executive management team actually went and toured. And so we took some ideas from there and integrated them in the Euclid corridor. And now at Metro Health, our third BRT project, as Mary Beth said, it's about 4.5 miles long, and we're looking to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million. Now, of course, you know, if it was a rail project, it'd be hundreds of millions of dollars, if not approaching $1 billion. So big difference. We do try to focus on minimizing impact to stakeholders along the route. We have numerous meetings, we have community meetings, stakeholder group meetings, and to make sure we have our finger on the pulse of what's going on around us, so we don't disrupt people any more than absolutely necessary. So we have a public meeting coming up on the 20th of November for Metro Health, where design is about 30% right now, moving to 60%. So we're going to have dedicated lanes on most of that corridor, and then traffic lanes, so 2 traffic lanes and 2 bus lanes. There may be a couple exceptions to that along the route, and we're currently meeting with stakeholders to try to determine what those design areas will be.
So I guess for us, what's is really important is what Joe just said. We have to, you know, we compete with the car, so we have to move our people as fast as we can without jeopardizing safety. We have to get them to the station safely. We have to really put a lot of care and character into the bus area, the station area, as Joe mentioned.
Yeah, one of the areas that's emerged is having more emphasis on this more recent project is pedestrian and bicycle connections, interacting with several bicycle routes, making sure that pedestrians have good access to the stations, and safety, improving safety along the corridor, like say widening sidewalks where they're extremely narrow, and clearing such things as extra poles out of the way, and improving the ADA access by ramps and grades of the sidewalks and at the stations.
And what we found is that, you know, BRT is everything. It's really, it can be just an express bus, or it can be something as heavy as the health line. And what we found is the more time and character and money you spend getting those to look and elevate the transit experience, the more successful it'll be, both in a mobility transit perspective and an investment and a neighborhood placemaking. And these neighborhoods are very diverse. The Metro Health line has one of the highest number of people who speak Spanish in the state. It has the highest in the state. So, and that's the central part of the corridor. So creating an experience for them, as well as the Gen Zs who are in Ohio City, and then the older millennials, as well as me, old people like me, that are in the old Brooklyn area near the zoo.
Yeah, the signage will be bilingual in this portion of the corridor.
So I think the budget, Joe, for the Metro Health line is 50 million. We plan to get 20 million from the FTA small starts, new starts process. We are in that funnel right now. Construction is scheduled for when, Joe?
The end of 26 through 27.
Right now, as he said, we're in the design process and our NEPA process. We hope to get that document ready and out the door early next year, and then begin all of our paperwork. It's a federal process, so you can imagine what the paperwork is to get through that and then to get funded. We
Yes,
already have funds we've put our funds in it. We've got state funds, we've got track funds, we've got all sorts of funds already. So financially that project is set.
yeah, the days of a single grant funding a project are long over. It's funding stacks now is the word they use.
So I guess we're done. And I don't know, John, if you want.
No, that's wonderful. That's great information to start with. I'm going to turn it over now to Kim Sharp with COTA. Kim, you should be able to share your slides if you've got slides.
I do, and I am calling from beautiful town of Fountain from the coffee shop. So I apologize if it's a little noisy, but it's great to be surrounded by so many people. So I will start here. I do have a few slides.
Oh, and
First of all, yes.
congratulations.
Thank you to the Central Ohio community for saying yes. It is a big deal. And excuse my slightly unprofessional appearance. I'm actually at a Boy Scout camp this weekend that's right in Beltline. So we're having a lot of fun. But Link Us is a clean package. We'll talk about the money in a minute. Really, it's a faster transit, more transit, but it does include bike sidewalks in the development along the corridor. The illustration you see here is actually drawn over our existing Owens and Delivered Road, which is essentially a 6-lane roadway in the Columbus area. And you can see we're utilizing the existing right-of-way from the lot there, pedestrian infrastructure. It is dedicated lanes, which are really important. But you also see 3- and 4-story buildings along this area. And we've learned a lot from Cleveland and other cities where it's that development that makes a big difference. So thank you to the whole COTA service area, which is all of Franklin County and little bits of Union, Delaware, Licking, and Fairfield County. What we were awarded is we will now have a full 1% permit. We were at a 0.5%, and half of that was for the sundown in 2026, and half of it now it's all permanent, and it's a full 1%, and that's how we built our financial model. A financial model that showed multiple quarters. So what our financial model is built out to 2050, showing what you see in light gray here is our existing 38 lines, 3,000 stops. What you've seen highlighted now is our lines, which are going to see a lot more frequency, extensions, improvements. And then these are the 3 engineering design. West Broad is also in the up-to-date CIG project, and we're moving towards 90% engineering design. East Main is also in the up-to-date CIG, and that's putting close to 60% design. Northwest Corridor is around 15% design, and it does have an adopted locally preferred alternative showing the stops and locations, but that'll be moving towards 30%. These 3 that just popped up in teal blue, these one, Ohio Department of Transportation, put that through the initial phase. And John, what you are referring to there was the line going past the airport towards the northeast area, but almost like the corridor number 4. You see a line going down to 1,000 jobs down there. And then you see one that's really connecting northern and east-west, and a lot of jumps there.
The sound.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Can you please fix the sound?
Switch the sound.
Yeah, Kim, we're just getting a lot of an echo.
I'll be grand spot. I don't have a microphone. Maybe I can step outside. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Okay. This will be better.
Oh, yeah, that's much better, Kim. Thank you.
What you see popped up in green is these have been deemed by our MPO as ripe for analysis. And the reason that's, of course, connecting the job centers and the housing centers. So these are where it's really growing. So that financial model covers increasing our existing service, 8 new on-demand zones. We currently have 3 on-demand zones. And that's really a first mile, last mile connectivity. Those 14 existing or improved lines, and then the 5 rapid transit lines. Now, of course, what you see here is more than 5 rapid transit lines. Some of these lines are deemed, they really just need improved service, plain and simple. But some of these may grow to be necessary for BRT in the future. And everything John already talked about is really important for BRT. All the things are included in the ingredients to have your premium BRT. And I'm going to give an example of West Broad. We're looking at 9.3 miles. So that's 85,000 jobs, 17 stations. And around each station, we are doing a market analysis. We're working with the local municipality to really focus on how can redevelopment and reinvestment in the existing neighborhood happen so that there is a walkable mixed-use neighborhood around each of these stations. Around some of the stations that already exist. So it's really about preservation, respecting the community that's there. And in some of these, what you see are huge, older shopping centers with gargantuan parking lots. So that's called ripe for redevelopment and reinvestment. And I can go back to any of these if you want to, but I just wanted to copy this one. Now, I would like to learn from Cleveland how you're building a BRT line for $50 million. Ours is $365 million, and that's a lot of new infrastructure. We're moving infrastructure around. There's a lot of right-of-way. About 35 million of this is right-of-way acquisition, and particular intersection improvements to work with the traffic engineering divisions, et cetera. So I just wanted to lay out that we do have a reasonable financial plan for that $365 million. So we are in the queue for the $150 million FTA CIG grant. We did win another U.S. Department of Transportation grant for right-of-way improvements. We won an ODOT TREC grant last year. We have money from our local MORPC, but that's considered federal. And then, of course, we're utilizing our local bonding and other revenues. Thanks to this levy that passed, we're able to start building this up and moving these things forward. This is one example. And I'm happy to answer questions or go back to these. This is an illustration of West Broad Street. And what I really like to point out here, this is all the things we've talked about, dedicated lanes, signal prioritization, et cetera. But these white buildings you see are currently parking lots. So what's really important and what we really emphasize to the community and the property owners and the business owners along these corridors is we have got to have infill. We've got to have infill and walkability. That's the only way this is really going to work for us, for you, for the community. Along the BRT, there's a couple of places for micro transit for bicycles and scooters and so forth. This is an example. An illustration of, entering a center station and all the things that make it. And just pointing out that a big part of the levy that was approved, a portion of the sales tax revenues every year goes towards building sidewalks and bikeways. And that was a change that was made at the state legislature level to allow that. And it's really important because we have found that 95% of COTA's customers walk to the bus stop. And in many of those situations, there aren't sidewalks or ways to get there. Therefore, we're going to work hand in hand with our MPO, with MORPC, and with the local jurisdictions to ensure that over the years, these sidewalk gaps and bicycle gaps are filled in. This is a great example of the Heritage Trail, which is a unused rail corridor. There's a couple of lines actually there from the back of the Crew Stadium all the way up into Hilliard, 8.5 miles, where they'll be utilizing these transit supported infrastructure dollars or dollars for sidewalks and bikeways to begin purchasing the right of way. They're going to utilize other dollars to build the bikeway system. And then we're partnering with them, COTA, to analyze what type of transit might be possible to go along a Rails to Trails program. And this will take time, but this is something that will be highly used, well connected, and really move people around. In my last couple of slides is really about, we've got to really make sure there's walkable mixed use around these stations. And I love to use this. Yes, we stole this from GRTC, but it really hit home for a lot of people that return on investment is important to our community and that we can't just keep growing out. Columbus is really spread out. We've got to learn to grow and really build in those neighborhoods. And that's all I have. So it's just me thanking Central Ohio voters. Thank you to those on the line. The levy did pass by a good margin. And now we're ready to start, it's time to get to work. So with that, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to everybody for your introductions. We're going to start working through some of the questions that I had that Lenny and I had prepared. And we'll kind of throw these out to any of the three of you that would want to answer. And for those on the line, these are kind of separated into three broad categories. We've got questions that would answer, kind of highlight some thoughts that transit supporters may have. We've got some questions that are probably more geared toward business owners, which for those of us in the advocacy community, it's great to know where their headspace is at and what can benefit them. And then also questions that we can use to help advocate towards our elected officials at all levels. So I'm going to kind of grab one right out of the middle here. This is from the business owners section. And Tim, I'm sorry, because I think you know. How will BRT routes affect nearby parking and loading zones for businesses? And I'll throw that out maybe to anybody who wants to answer.
I'll start, and then I'm sure Mary Beth and Joe have some answers too. We have spent time going door to door, talking to every single business. There's 2,000 businesses along West Broad, and we've worked them to understand how they load, unload, and where their customers park and how their employees get there. And so working with each of them to understand there has to be a plan during construction and there has to be a plan afterwards. Now, there's only a couple of the owners who are like, but I don't want to pull in the back alley, even though there's a back alley there, and learn to unload there. Most everyone's like, oh, we can just pull around this way, or we can, make it work this way. Most are excited. And of course you have to work through the ones who it seems unmanageable or difficult. And that's what we're doing now as we gear up and get ready to start on construction on our first quarter. But I think I'd love to hear from those that have built figures.
Yes, that was a big bone of contention along Euclid, was loading zones and business access. And we, in fact, were changing curb lines and parking and loading zones even through construction as different things arose. And I would say that overall, there's been a lot of satisfaction, but one thing that has definitely been a persistent issue is double parking and triple parking. There's a lot of delivery vehicles around nowadays, and they don't care. They will park as soon as they can to unload and take off again. So that's something that has to be thought of pretty carefully. I know we're thinking about it on 25th, but of course, to create a BRT, one of the basic elements is having exclusive lanes. So you're going to have that as a challenge no matter what project you do.
I think you guys must have been at our meetings this week where we met with Ohio City business owners about parking. There's lots of ways you can mitigate on street parking. You can keep it, or you can, like what we've tried to do is find places where they can park off street and then just walk to the business. But yeah, we just had meetings this week. We've got a couple black and blue marks from it. But the parking is important to businesses, but it really hurts BRT. Because people are in the other lane trying to get into parking, and we're doing the best we can. It's really a balancing act. And if you look at the Metro Health line, the corridor closer to downtown in the Ohio City area is the one that has the most acute need for parking. So that's the one where the businesses are much more vocal. But we're working with them, with the community development group, Ohio City Inc., the councilman, the city, and traffic engineering in that area. The rest of the corridor isn't really as concerned.
Certainly when you have a healthy street level community of businesses, bars, and restaurants, you don't want to destroy that.
I'll say that our City of Columbus Parking and Mobility Division has been a great partner, and they're actually working on updating their policies and enforcement. They're trying to figure out which community has done it the right way, the way of enforcement, at the same time trying to work on locating parking otherwise, whether it's tucked back in that alley or buying that parking lot that no one ever uses to turn it into a public parking for a while, just trying to mitigate here and there so we can move some parking and get that on-street parking off the street. They've been a good partner in that.
So is the city of Cleveland. I mean, they have a TDM policy for all development. They have no parking minimums. The traffic engineer himself said, I don't care if you get rid of all the parking. I support that, and because I know how well it'll move traffic. So we have a really good relationship but it's the business owners and it is their businesses, so we're working with them.
Yeah, certainly the Metro Health corridor we're working on now, there is a lot of off-street parking. But if you have a small business where people are coming and picking up stuff all the time, you still want that space right in front of your business.
Great answers, everyone. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about cost of use. So what strategies do you folks have in place at your respective transit authorities to ensure that BRT remains an affordable option for all users?
At RTA, we haven't increased fares in a while. It's an all-day pass. Our BRT services are the same. It's an all-day pass. So whatever, if you take the red line or the blue line or the green line or any bus, it's the $5 pass. We're very focused on equity. We did a fare equity study where we actually reduced our fares and stopped any increases that we had planned. So we're doing everything we can to keep our fares the same. The other thing I know, Kim mentioned it, how do we do a BRT for 50 million? And Joe's the master at this. We don't buy a lot of right away. We put our stuff on the curbside. We minimize as much construction as we can, especially when you're into utilities and moving stuff around.
Yes.
So Joe, you can probably go into more detail on that.
Yes, because anytime you get into utilities or moving curb lines, it becomes very expensive. And we want to focus on delivering the BRT service and not rebuilding the urban environment. Now, of course, I could go back to Euclid where for 200 million, we did rebuild the utilities and everything, but that was a pretty harrowing process for some of the blocks. And we had to work pretty closely with business owners to put up signage, maintain access, and make sure we were communicating about where the project was at to them on an almost daily basis.
And during that process, I mean, it was a 2-year process of building Euclid. I remember we also opened it in segments, which helped us operationalize and figure out where we were saving the most time. And I remember hearing radio commercials saying, we play more songs in a row than it takes RTA to build the Euclid Corridor project. So it was interesting.
Wonderful. So what funding sources are supporting your various projects at kind of both corners of the state? And is this funding model sustainable?
The funding model is sustainable because it's like there was a commercial about making Prego, it's all in there. So if one goes away, you have others. So I think Kim and RTA share that we're both in the CIG new small starts for about half of the project construction costs. We both have track funding, which is Ohio State capacity building funding. We both have funding from our MPO in some fashion, and we are both using some of our own funding, capital and grant funding. So it's a stack of all different things. Sometimes like the city has money for a street resurfacing that could be state or county money that also goes into it. We also have a smart cities signalization grant that's looking at some of the signals on the Metro Health line. So looking at, and we've applied for additional funds from NOACA, which is our MPO, for some street improvements and enhancements. We're looking at Safe Streets for All for additional improvements. There's also some state money that now came up for bike connections, which we'll also try to put together. So you have a basic project that goes through the federal process, but then you try to enhance it with the community and the city to make it the best you can.
And then we also realize that every BRT line is going to have a different capital stack. Even if 150 remains consistent, we're hoping it remains consistent, at least for these first two. We know we're going to have to go after different funds and put together innovative financing That's one thing we did win was a regional infrastructure accelerator grant through the Build America Bureau. That's the U.S. Department of Transportation, specifically to help COTA focus on innovative financing, utilizing funds like we've never done before, tapping into things like transportation improvement districts, TFIA funds, port authorities, et cetera, and understanding how to navigate that process. And we also are closely coordinating with ODOT and the Franklin County Engineer's Office, because so we could see if we could find some savings on especially timing and resource, procuring resources together.
Great, great answers. So I'm a business owner and I have a business along a proposed route. What will the construction impacts be along the route and what support will be available during that period?
Well, I could talk about Metro Health, that the construction will basically be the station areas. And we will certainly move things around to suit the business owner as much as we can and try to minimize the disruption by providing access and signage. The stations are not so huge that it should impact more than a few storefronts, but we intend to work closely with affected business owners. There'll be some traffic signal work. Again, that'll be minimal impact to business owners. But we also intend to repave the entire street. And of course, we'll have to communicate when we're going to do that and try to make sure that goes as smoothly as possible. I never would want to say there's not going to be any disruption, because I know that wasn't true. But we can try to minimize the effects of it. And that's usually what people are looking for.
Typically with our contractors, once we award it to a construction contractor, we do have a support contractor that is the liaison between our TA and the contractor and the community. For the Metro, for the health line, we actually had someone on staff, that was her job, to communicate where we are next, where we're going, to the businesses, to be the feet on the ground, telling the businesses what's going on, how long it would last. And on that project, we also have the city ahead of us doing a lot of the utility work, and I will say disruption. And so we worked hand in hand with them, but we basically, you know, we have a maintenance of traffic and we look very closely at our contractor to help support us and support the businesses along that corridor to let them know what's going on. Not just an open for business during construction, not just that sign.
And we're also learning from that and getting somebody on board. Same thing, daily communication with all the business owners and residents. And that resource meeting is important.
Yeah, I think people are a lot more comfortable with something if they know what to expect.
And right now, there's so many more ways to communicate than there was 15 years ago when we did the helpline. And we'll use all of those methods. Not that everybody
Wonderful.
reads them, but.
So one thing that we haven't really talked a lot about is sustainability and the environmental impact of improved public transit. What role does BRT play in reducing carbon emissions and promoting sustainable urban development?
Well, our corridors are all in dense urban environments. One of our strategic initiatives is really to increase equity and to densify in those areas. We're more into service rather than coverage, although we do cover the entire county, and we only cover one county. So we're all about, you know, that if you increase transit time, if you decrease the number of VMT, that hot spots, air pollution, all that decreases, get people out of their cars and into transit vehicles, whether it's a train or a bus. So we're all about that. We do have, we're looking at some solar at our shelters. We're looking at just how to move people better and quicker throughout our system. We do have a study to look at electrification and other sustainable technologies that we can use at RTA on our BRTs and all of our vehicles. We also have this really unique initiative that the city and the foundations are looking at of trying to solar rail, trying to get some of our rail system. I know those of you who know about our system no solar rail could be quite interesting, but because it uses a lot of power, but looking at, could that be done? So that's what we're doing. We have a climate action plan that we're working closely with the city and the county on theirs.
And then we also have a sustainability plan for zero emission, all of our fleet, zero emissions by 2030, I believe, but we do have 10 electric buses out on the fleet. And our plans are for the BRT corridors, 12 electric articulated buses. And we did just win a federal grant to explore hydro power. So that will be. So we're exploring that, and we already use CNG, but it's really about mode shift, getting people walking and biking and on transit. And that's a huge focus of both our MPO and then of course COTA and the city with their climate action plan.
Wonderful. Well, I think we are close enough to the 11 o'clock hour that I'm going to ask Brian to jump in, and maybe he and I can kind of dig through the chat window here and field some of these questions towards our panel and hopefully get as many of them answered as we can. So Brian, I'll let you lead off with questions from the chat.
Yeah, sure. I mean, quite a few when it comes to BRT regarding the use of dedicated lanes. Some of the more recent imagery of the West 25th corridor through Cleveland implies there's not a plan to use dedicated lanes around Lorraine. So one of our participants here pointed out that when he rides the 51 through that corridor, he's often stuck in traffic. So there's a lot of concern, is there a commitment to dedicated lanes throughout that corridor?
There is. I know though that we have to be sensitive to the community we're going through. And that area is pretty special. It's got a pretty lively urban character going on. We don't want to disrupt that. But we do want to maintain our primary focus, which is a BRT. So we've shown several alternatives, and we're still working through the process of what exactly we'll do in that area.
And we're working closely with the city and our traffic engineering just to make sure those movements are more efficient and really rationalize the right of way. We've got a lot of buses in that area. And on Lorraine, that's, between Lorraine, Detroit, and the market, that's really our pinch point. We're looking very closely. We do have an alternative where we have dedicated 24/7 bus lanes and no parking. Obviously, we just discussed merchants. They were not happy.
Yeah.
We're going to do that.
We have another alternative where we have parking on both sides, and a third alternative where we have parking on one side.
But we are also doing improvements to our signal system in order to move our buses a lot better and more efficiently and effectively. So we know when I did the plan for Metro Health, we didn't know where to put this bus station at Lorraine because of the Lorraine bus. It's very heavily routed. And hopefully when we study Lorraine next year, we'll be able to crack that nut a little bit better.
Thank you.
I'll just share that West Broad is designed at around 70% dedicated lane right now. And we know that as you start working through the details, that can shift a little bit. And East Main, we're at about 68% dedicated lane.
Good. Let's see. There were questions on the rapid and the train, but I think we were able to get most of those answered in the chat. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean the majority of the questions were about dedicated lanes and then some related specific things. So I think if we're kind of getting into more details, and maybe this can be comments both on the future RTA BRT lines as well as the Central Ohio RTA lines. There were questions about some of the other specifics. So a big one that keeps coming up is all door boarding and off fare payment. So what are the plans on the future Cleveland lines and continue to improve that on the health line, and then maybe we can get into the Central Ohio plans.
Well, we have the transit app that we're working through. We had off fare collection and machines on the health line. But they were ruled unconstitutional. So we're looking at actually on board, but doing it much quicker on the Metro Health line. That we can. I know it slows traffic a lot, but it also increases our the money that we get from the fare box, as well as enhances security along that plan. We do have both door boardings, both sides, as you know, on the health line. And we're looking, we probably won't do that anymore. But we're looking at getting people in both sides and quickly to reduce dwell time as much as we can.
And then maybe on the COTA projects?
So we've had technology visits over the last few months. We've visited Richmond, Virginia, Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington, Phoenix, just trying to understand. It's really the focus is technology, how to use technology to do really smart and easy onboarding and fare collection. And we went as a secret shopper to Indigo's Purple Line on their day 2 of their opening. I let them know, but and really people do it very differently. But what we're finding is, especially in Central Ohio, more and more are using the app. 2 years ago, only about 14% used the app. Now it's getting close to 50% of everyone uses digital to purchase and do the beep beep when they get on. So we're, there's an adaptation that's going on. We're learning to use that, and that makes validation as you step on validation much easier. And we're seeing some people do fare collection and validation off board. Some do fare collection off board, and validation as you step on. And we're trying to analyze what makes the most sense for us. As we haven't ordered the buses yet, but we will be this coming year. We have about 4 months to figure that out.
See, one more question here came in for the Central Ohio BRTs. Will you talked a little bit on the boarding process, but will it be all door boarding and level boarding? So raised platforms along the route? Yes,
it is raised platforms everywhere. A lot of them are central. Raised platforms, all door boarding, I believe so. As soon as we figure out the validation, whether it's off or on, but it will be all door boarding, and they are 60-foot articulated buses. And we do have signal prioritization, and we're trying to work that out with the city in a current MOU agreement, how that works and how we share the data. So that is also really important.
Great, thank you. Let's see.
I like that last question regarding why BRT lines don't show up in the Google Maps transit app like rail transit lines. I think that's probably a good question for Google, for the transit app and the GTFS feeds, and how to make that look more like rail lines and show the frequency. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that question because I thought that they were there, but maybe that's just a matter of different people using different apps for it. Good. Yeah. So that's what a lot of the questions in the chat were along. I think one of the things that we as transit advocates always get concerned about is BRT creep, where we start with all of the best features that were implemented in Curitiba, Brazil, but then those tend to get watered down over time. I mean, when we look at the health line, we've got dedicated lines from downtown to East 105th and that, but then because the other roads go away, there was, a lot more pressure there and not able to get dedicated lanes. And so the buses really slow down through that section. And those are the balances and trade-offs that get worked through as we go through all of these types of projects.
There's a contingency from, sorry, Mary Beth, go ahead.
We just ended a project called Reimagine Euclid, where we looked at universities, those stations from 105th to East Cleveland to see, could we get a dedicated lane? Could we move the stations? Could we do something? And as Joe always says, you can do anything with enough money. But then undoing the system that you already built can be problematic. But we did look at that, and we'll continue to look at how we can do that effectively. We also looked at it a little bit when we did, we reviewed the extension of the Red Line East, and we added, the BRT, if we could extend that. And There's a lot we could do. It's expensive. And you know, if you go through University Circle, it's a very historic, tight right of way. We tried really hard to keep those curb lanes, but it's really, and to keep in the middle, and you just can't. So we're doing
Yeah.
everything we can. And luckily, you know, Kim mentioned technology. Technology can be our friend here.
Yeah, and I think for people who aren't as familiar with the geography, like west of there are 4 or 5 major east-west roads. And once you hit 105th, you only have one. So that was part of the reason it became not a possible thing to do. Kim, it looked like you were going to add in something there.
Just that a contingent of us from Central did go to COTA last year, and some of those big takeaways for us was out of a city of 3 million, 1 million people a day use the system. And so their state government generally funds the capital projects, but it's the fare revenues that fund their operations. Almost totally. And so I think that was really interesting and an eye opener. They also handle stormwater in a very strategic way, and they've completely redesigned their streets. So they have very specific BRT streets that are all for BRT and pedestrians. And then they have very specific streets designed to move cars a little bit faster. Of course, they're only like 40 years ahead of us, but it was fantastic to kind of see that. But there's some really big key infrastructure pieces that aren't really part of BRT planning, but make a big difference in how it works in the end.
Yeah, and I think so much of the biggest lesson in the Healthline and its successes is that the land use around the transit project is by far the most important aspect. So I'm so glad to hear the COTA comments on that. And then I know not everybody's able to watch the chat, but I'm going to encourage you as you folks are working on promoting dedicated lanes. I've seen it suggested, hey, let's call them hero lanes. Those are for emergency services and ambulances and fire trucks. And oh yeah, the buses can use them too to get better service. And that might be one that gets a little bit better response from the community in improving emergency response times and then getting the advantages that we all know are there in dedicated lanes. So thank you so much, both to RTA here in the Northeast and to COTA for the presentations and information about current systems and new plans. We're all very excited for our friends in Columbus with the massive new investment they're going to be able to make and the transformative opportunities that these lines are going to present. So to all of our members who joined us this morning, thank you very much for spending your time with us. Hopefully you found it to be interesting. We have recorded this. If anybody wants to come back to it, or if you want to share it with others, we'll get that posted on the webpage here in the next week or so. John, I don't know if you have any closing comments. But otherwise I can kind of work on wrapping us up here. So thank you very much for the time. If you get a chance to look through the comments, we appreciate that. And John, maybe some closing thoughts.
Yeah, I would just echo your thanks to our friends at GCRTA and to COTA for joining us today. I found it very, very informative, and I think particularly, again, to be a transit advocate here in Central Ohio, looking forward, I'm very, very excited to see what the future of Columbus can become. So again, thank you to all of our members and guests that joined us today, and looking forward to seeing you again in a month.
Thank you.